So really quick before we get into doing the low poly, I noticed something. This shape is kind of hard to tell what's going on here. It's kind of shaded, kind of not, and that's because we haven't given it enough edge loops around here. So we're going to go into edge mode, which is right click, radial menu, edge. Double click that, it was already selected. Shift, right click, bevel edge, and then give it a value of something like 0.1, maybe 0.2, and then maybe 3 segments. And now that's much clearer what that shape is, and that's going to bake better too. Okay, so now low poly. First we want to get our high poly out of the way, and if you click, you can see there's still separate pieces, and they're all within sword high group. So when we hide them, we don't want to hide just one or a few pieces. We want to hide the whole thing. So we'll click the group parent, hit H on your keyboard. That will hide it. We can hit H again to bring it back. We'll just keep it hidden for now. We don't need this piece that we saved off earlier, so let's go ahead and delete that. And then same thing for the groups down here. Some are actually in a group here, and then some are off by themselves. But first, let's marquee select. Just left click, drag out a marquee. We're going to hit 0. We want to bring it back to the center. And now with these selected, just Shift P, that will unparent whatever group it's in. And then we can groups or drag marquee select again and just hit Control G to group them. Let's clear history. And now let's assess how we're going to make this low poly. A low poly is basically, we're going to use the shape of the low poly to cast rays onto the high poly, and those rays will calculate the shape of the high poly, and that calculation will be put into a bitmap called a normal map. And what the normal map does is it basically tells whatever is rendering it, like the renderer in Engine or in your, let's say Maya or anything else, it kind of tells the light how to show that surface, and it can fake geometry. So we can get, it'll look like there's this bevel inside, but it's actually just going to be a flat piece of geometry. So we can actually reduce this poly count by a whole lot and get a nice clean looking sword like this. So to do that, we're going to delete this side and then the bottom part, so we can just work on the top and then duplicate it down and across to save time. So to do that, we will go to our top view. And remember, we've got this super tiny bevel we put on here before. So tap F to go to that. Zoom in. So we want to just grab this, shift click around, click once, and then just shift click around. And it should have grabbed all the parts just to make sure that's a full loop. I believe it is, so we'll see in just a second. So with that still selected, you can barely see it. Just hit the delete key, and then double click here, and the other side shouldn't be selected. Okay, good. So remember, when you double click on a thing, you're going to select the entire contiguous mesh. So because we deleted that edge loop, we can just double click this, hit delete, and that whole side is gone. A little bit different for the bottom, but you can probably guess what we're going to do. We're just going to go into our side view and marquee select the bottom. And then hold Control Shift and marquee select again. Because if you were to just hold Shift and do it, you would unselect whatever's already selected. So you don't want that, so do Control Shift and drag a marquee. I believe that's all of it. I'm going to hide this tab so you can see more of the screen. Alright, so we can probably pull this bottom edge loop. Just as an example, we can probably pull it out and make it flat. And then we'll be able to bake this detail in. So we'll Control Shift, click this edge loop. Control Shift, click this edge loop. It'll terminate right there because we've got this edge here, but don't worry, we'll get rid of that in a minute. And then with those selected, Shift, right click to radial menu, delete edge. And we do that because if we, I'll just show you, Control Z back. If we were to just hit the delete key on our keyboard and then go into vertex mode, it left the vertices behind. We do not want that. So Control Z back. We've got them selected, Shift, right click, radial menu, delete edge. Now we've got a nice clean edge with no stray vertices. And then we'll go into edge select mode. We'll select from here all the way down, hold Shift, double click. You'll select the whole edge loop. Now we'll snap. So when you want to snap things with W, you can just tap these arrows here, and the one that's selected, the axis that's selected, will turn yellow. So at this point, with that turned yellow, all you have to do is press and hold V as in Victor, and then tap your middle mouse button on a vertice, and it will snap to wherever you want it. But we don't want it up here, we want it down here. So we'll snap to that. Now that should be perfectly flat. And then we'll clean this up right here. We will go into vertex mode, and then Shift, right click, merge vertices, target weld tool, and weld these together. Actually, I think that might look better if we do this. Yeah, that's way better. Okay. And we still have this edge loop here, so rather than delete the face, because we want, right now, this edge loop is perfectly aligned to 0 on this axis, on the x-axis. So rather than delete that face, we're just going to delete this edge loop. Control Shift, double click, should grab the whole thing just to test. Wiggle it, the whole thing is selected. Shift, right click, delete edge. And then we want to go into vertex mode because it did leave some stray stuff right here. That's just because the edge terminated there. So we'll go to Shift, right click, merge vertices, target weld, and just drag it up right there. So this is looking pretty okay. I'm going to do smooth preview just to see if there's anything looking kind of wonky. So the reason why I did smooth preview there isn't so much for the sake of how it's going to look in game, but just to see if there's anything stray. Like if there's a stray vertice, it'll kind of hold a different shape. But everything's looking good. So now let's move our gizmo down to the bottom here so we can mirror it downwards, and then we'll move it to the center up here so we can mirror it over. So again, D, V, middle mouse button, tap W to get rid of your transform there, Control D to duplicate, pirate button, R, scale it down. Remember we closed this, so let's open it back up. This is where it's changing, so we'll just do -1, enter. Then marquee select, Shift right click combined. Then we want to edit mesh, merge. We've got all this history here, so let's go ahead and do that, delete history. And now what you can see is we actually have too many polys here. So we've got 1, 2, and then 1, 2 down here. We don't necessarily need this edge loop here. So we go to edge mode, double click that. It'll select all of that, Shift, right click to radial menu, delete edge. Let's make sure it works, so vertices, and there's no verts there. Good. This is just what we want. So let's move our gizmo right here. So D, V, middle mouse, W, Control D, pirate button, scale it, -1, marquee select, combined, Shift right click, radial menu combined, and then edit mesh, merge. So just to make sure it's all merged, I'm going to tap 3, and this should deform and squish down. Perfect. If it wasn't, they would stay right where they are. So now is a great time to talk about hard edges, and I'm going to turn off grid just so you can get a better look at this thing. A hard edge, actually, I'm going to bring in a cube to talk about hard edges. See how the shading here is, you can see this is clearly one side, this is another side, just because the shading is working. If you were to select this, Shift, right click, soften harden edges, and then soften edge, super ugly. That's because the entire thing now has one smoothing group. So where it did have one smoothing group per side, because the hard edges define where a smooth or where a gradient is going to be defined, we just turned all that off, and now the entire thing just has one gradient. If you were to bake this, it would look pretty much like this. It would look pretty ugly. So the way how we define shading is typically we will add a hard edge or what are they called? A smoothing group. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting Max and Maya mixed together. So it's called a smoothing group, and each one of those needs to be broken up from a 90-degree angle or greater, so any acute angle. So basically anything that's 90 degrees or sharper which that's an acute angle. See how it's sharp? It's like a blade. We would want to do Shift, right click, soften harden edge, harden edge. And that's not going to change too much because these ones haven't been defined yet either. So we'll just press G to redo what we just did, that harden edge command. And now that is hardened. The rest of it isn't though, so we could just marquee select, G again, and now they're all smoothing groups. And this matters in baking. I'll give you a supplemental video for baking, and we'll also cover baking in this in my next video. But you always want to be thinking ahead for this. So basically, long story short, we're going to select this blade, Shift, right click, soften harden edge, soften. It's going to be ugly for a second. And then we're just going to grab these very sharp edges because it's a blade. And that's pretty much all we need. So Shift, right click, soften harden edges, harden edge. And you can get really into the weeds. There's a lot of technical stuff as to why we're doing this. I put that video up in the workflow guide, and I will link to it in the video when I post this, because if you want to know workflow, well, you're going to want to know workflow. Whenever you're making anything in the future, if you understand the hows and the whys, you'll never have a problem with baking. But this is perfectly fine. Let's delete our history, and then let's move on to this. This is kind of already pretty great. We're just going to delete some of the edge loops here. Yeah, I kind of want to keep this just for the sake of silhouette. Actually, no, we don't need that. Yeah, we'll weld that. So we can just grab this edge loop. It's going all the way around. Yep. Shift, radial menu, right click, delete edge. Same deal here. We can actually just hit G, and that's gone. And that's pretty much our low poly. Because of the way we worked, we made our high poly first out of smooth pieces, and we saved them. You can really save a lot of time. So that'll be a good low poly. So let's do that smoothing group thing again. Grab it. Okay. So see how each one of these is its own smoothing group? Because all these edges are hard. We don't want that. So select it, Shift, right click, soften harden. We can soften the whole thing. And then just select these edges. We're just going to grab the acute angles and 90 degree if you want to be super technical about it. Shift, right click, radial menu, soften harden edge, harden edge. And now when we UV, each one of these hard edges are going to define a UV shell, and you'll see that in a bit. Same thing here. We want to soften this one. And I think there might be some stuff inside here, so let's select it, center pivot, because remember the pivot's way over there now. Just so we can grab it. Yep. So let's delete these edges, or faces. So when I did that, I just marquee selected, grab that, and then Control marquee select will unselect that. Tap delete. It's fine to just tap delete on your keyboard for faces. And I'm actually going to merge these two together and weld them. So remember, we just moved it up a bit, so go right here and do -1. Oops. Go to 0, not -1. And there were some faces on the inside of this as well, just to prove it. All right, there. So without even having to move it, we know they're there, so we can just marquee select through. And then sorry, my headset turned off again because I'm not playing any sound through it. So those are still selected. We'll hit delete, and just to prove they're gone, they're gone. So let's select both of these. Shift, right click to radial menu, combined, and then you guessed it, edit mesh, merge. So you might be wondering why some of these lines are still thick. That's because they have crease values, and crease values aren't really a big deal right now. They're not going to do anything to us. We can press 3. Like, they'll still crease, but I'm making sure everything's welded. So you should have spotted, hopefully you spotted, we don't need this edge anymore. So we can grab this edge, Shift, radial menu, delete. To explain why we don't need this edge, see how the silhouette is defined by these? And then this isn't really defining any silhouette. It's just following the same pattern as these. We don't need that. This is just wasted vertices. So Shift, radial menu, delete edge. We're good to go. This honestly could be welded. It could actually just be 1 point, but it's not the best. But depending on like how, like, is the player ever going to see that down there? If you're doing like a Skyrim game, is the player ever really going to see that? Probably not. So we can actually just merge all these. So we'll marquee select the vertices, Shift, radial menu, merge vertices, merge the center. And just to make sure, we'll bring back our high poly real quick. Select the parent, tap H, and then select this part of your low poly. Grab, we want to go into, so with that selected, we want to go into vertex mode. We want to make sure that's sitting on top. Yep, that'll bake just fine. So you might notice these are a little bit out. Well, you know what? We're actually ready to do that. So let's go to live surface mode. So with this selected, select your high poly from the parent, click the magnet tool. Hang on. Don't do that. Don't do the parent. Just select this piece here. You can't actually make a whole, you have to make a mesh. So we would have to grab all these and combine. So all we're really focused on is the hilt now. So click the hilt, click the magnet. And now we can go into vertex mode, select the vertice, and just barely nudge it, and it'll snap down. If you were to bake like this, it would look okay from this angle, but as soon as we look from this angle, it'll have a black, nasty shading error. So we'll just barely touch it there, and by snapping it to this, it'll look a lot nicer. It'll capture more of this shape. Sorry. You know, I think we could actually get some more definition into this. If I were making this like for a portfolio piece, I would definitely give more topology to this piece, but for our demonstration here, actually, yeah, I'm going to show you that. So for right here, see how this is super low poly, just it's real chunky, and we see that it really just cuts through. What we can do is make a few terminating edge loops. So we're going to give this more topology while not touching this, and the way we're going to do that, okay, that's a little confusing, but just it's wireframe. Grab your multi-cut tool with with live surface on, that's fine. So we'll click this vertice here, hold down Shift onto this, see how it'll snap to the center. If it's not, like, we could click and then drag it. We don't want that. Hit Control Z. Just hold down Shift, it'll hover over, it'll make a black dot. That's the exact center. Click once, and then just click down here like normal. Hit Enter. Do the same here. And then do the same thing for this piece. You want to make sure you close this off, otherwise, well, actually, that's still a quad, but it's good to triangulate this. All right, one more. Just going to click here, Shift, click back down, hit Enter. Click that one that we just made, click here, hit Enter. Tap Q to get out of this view, because technically we're kind of in quad draw. And now there's way more definition there, which is great. So now we just want to mirror this over to save some time. So spacebar, top view, tap F, marquee select that just to focus on it. Then we want to go into face and marquee right down the halfway mark. Let's make sure. Hit delete. Again, W, press D, V, middle mouse button, wiggle it right there. Don't forget to save. I'm going to do that myself. And then go to R, Control D to mirror, or to create a new one, and then we're going to mirror it across. -1, marquee select, Shift, radial menu, combined, and then again, edit mesh, merge. Tap Q, Then let's delete all this history. Gonna press 3 to make sure it smooths. Doesn't look like this got merged, and yep. So you see that? That's just always a great way to see if everything's together. So 1, it's normal. Tap 3, you see how this isn't deforming? That's because these aren't welded, which is fine. That's an easy fix. Go into vertex mode, marquee select, shift, radial menu with right mouse, merge to center. And these down here, same deal. Okay, looks like the whole thing is good to go. So shift, right click, let's make these soft. We could possibly, actually, hang on. I'm going to turn off live surface just so we can grab these and crush them, make them perfectly straight. Let's turn on the high poly really quick, tap H. That's gonna bake just fine. Zoom out just to see the clipping, yeah. Needs to hide that again. Yeah, we'll see how that does. This should bake fine. Okay, so delete history. We are now ready to UV. Except I don't think, yeah, we'll do that next video. Right now, all we need to do is marquee select, Shift P to break it out of whatever parent group it's in. Marquee select again, tap, well, first I'm going to bring back grid. Tap D and then hold down X, middle mouse button to drag this around and then bring it right back to the center. Now when we select this, it's in the center, and same deal for the high poly. Alright, next video we will UV this thing. Wait, one last thing. With your low poly, marquee select it, press Ctrl G, and I would suggest naming this sword_low, and then match up here. So with the blade, we want to call that blade_low. Crossguard_low. Make sure you have the same spelling and same punctuation. Not punctuation, capitalization. That really only matters in Substance Painter, but we'll find out. And that's a hilt_low. Okay, so now you need to know what to turn in. So take your sword high, unhide that, make sure it's selecting all the things, and then you want to go to File, Export Selection. Don't click the box, just click that, and then save it wherever you want to. And then you can go ahead and hide that, and then just click the parent group for the low. Same deal, File, Export Selection, and then export it as an FBX wherever you want. And then send me both of those files in a zip folder. This time you can only submit zip folders, so you can't do it wrong. Alright, good luck guys.